Hey, do you want dessert? I'll get something from the kitchen. I asked my wife of 13 years, Marie, removing my hand from her shoulder, which she was leaning on as we watched TV. No, I'm fine, baby. Well, maybe another glass of wine, giggled the 6 foot tall beauty, waving her glass at me from the couch I was standing on. I took her glass and headed to the kitchen with a wink, happy with the realization that I was probably going to get lucky tonight. Not that I doubted it much, because just 5 hours ago I had returned from a 3 week business trip, the longest in our 13-year marriage. It was also the longest time we had spent apart since we met and started dating in college when she was a junior and I was a senior, 16 years ago. I learned very early on that wine was Marie's secret. A little and she would get flirty. A lot and she'd pass out. But between a little and a lot was the magical place of a highly charged woman who could put Scheherazade from 1001 Arabian Nights to shame. She was already giving subtle signals that 3 weeks was too long. Reflecting on how lucky I was to have found this woman, I made my way to the kitchen and filled Marie's glass with wine. Then I thought about what I would like to snack on and realized I wanted something cold and creamy, ice cream. It's one of my secret vices, perhaps my only vice, but I trained hard, running 4 miles each day to work off those calories. My vice wasn't alcohol, not cigarettes, not gambling, except for Marie herself. It was cookies and cream ice cream. I set the small bowl on the counter, took a scoop, and opened the freezer door. I looked, took the cookies and cream, and then froze in place as firmly as the ice cream, pondering life, the universe, and everything in the world. Remember the old meme about men who hold the refrigerator door open and stare through it? That was me. You see, there wasn't just one tub of ice cream in the freezer. There were two. My favorite, cookies and cream, which was suddenly more dear to me than the woman who moments before had been the love of my life, and a second one, butter pecan ice cream. The thoughts that ran through my head at that moment started with "what the hell?" progressed to "she's trying to destroy me." And oh my God, she not only destroyed me, she destroyed our marriage. That's how I realized that my marriage to this bitch, this cheating whore, who I loved more than life until I opened the refrigerator door, was over. You see, Marie doesn't like ice cream. She loves sorbet, but for some reason she hates ice cream. She never buys it unless I specifically ask for it. And yet there was butter pecan in our freezer. Did I explain that I am highly allergic to pecans and a number of other tree nuts like walnuts? Did I not explain? My bad. I have a reaction that causes anaphylactic shock, severe anaphylactic shock, in less than a minute if I ingest certain nuts. Pecans definitely fall into this category, and when we were only married for a year or so, I nearly died of anaphylactic shock after eating a pork chop at one of our local upscale establishments. The pork chop was sprinkled with ground pecans to give it extra flavor while grilling. But that wasn't listed. I didn't have my EpiPen with me. My mistake, I know. But luckily, one of the diners in the restaurant did. Still, it took long enough to keep me in the hospital for 4 days to be examined for neurological damage, and I even got secondary anaphylaxis in the hospital. Marie was there. She knew it. She held my hand the entire time I was in the hospital, except when the nurses or her bladder forced her to pull away for a few minutes. Since that day, I have always, and I mean always, kept the EPI within 10 feet of me, if not with me. But there was another acquaintance who also loved ice cream. And his favorite flavor? I'll give you a hint. Jonathan Williams. Jonathan goddamn Williams was a son of a bitch who apparently spent at least some time while I was gone, at my house, with my wife, for the past 3 weeks. Enough time, from what I could see in the clear container, to let him eat most of a gallon tub of butter pecan. Jonathan Williams. Marie's last boyfriend before we hit it off. Jonathan Williams, single, decent looking, 37 years old, relatively trim, part of our social circle, owner of a cherry muscle car he hadn't earned through hard work, lived only 20 or so miles away from us, closer to where Marie worked. The asshole was at my house. My house. And if he was here, having eaten enough pecan butter to make that tub whole, he was here many nights while I was gone. He was in my house, in my bed, and at my wife's house. A bounce? No, not really. I called Marie every night while we were apart, and a few times during the day or early evening. She almost always answered when I called, and when she didn't, she always called back within 15 minutes or so. At the beginning of the trip, we talked for an hour or so each day. Later, after about 9 days, the calls got shorter. And I didn't expect or even have nightmares that Marie would cheat on me, but butter pecans suddenly cleared up a lot of things in my head. I was stunned. I was hurt. I was angry. But I wasn't in denial. Marie was cheating on me with Jonathan asshole Williams. It was hard to believe, also because of the way they'd broken up. They had a hot couple until he was caught dating some girl on the side. They had some sort of argument that I've only heard vague scraps of, and they ended up breaking up. Before that, they were both on the fringes of my social circle, so I didn't follow their relationship. I returned my favorite cookies and cream to the freezer, no longer feeling the urge to eat ice cream. Instead, I had a deep thirst for revenge, for justice, for inflicting pain on those who had hurt me. I picked up my wine glass and swirled the pale pink liquid in the glass. I must have been doing this longer than I thought, because I was distracted from my gloomy thoughts by Marie's voice coming from the family room. Hank, honey, is everything okay? You've been carrying the appetizer and wine for a very long time. Oh, I'll be right there. I need to wash my ice cream scoop and it has some dirt on it, I replied, turning on the kitchen faucet. I needed a plan. I needed it fast. It didn't have to be perfect in the long run, but it had to be good right now. I didn't want to do this today, but I needed an excuse. How quickly our thoughts darken. From the love of my life, the most beautiful woman I know, to cheap whore in such a short time. I held out my wine glass to Marie, but didn't sit back down on the couch. Thanks. Where's your ice cream, Hank? Marie smirked, knowing my weakness be damned. I'm not in the mood to eat regular ice cream right now, not after getting dirt in the balloon. Truth be told, I wasn't really in the mood for anything, but I didn't voice it. I decided to run down to DQ and get a milkshake instead. Want one? Quick thought. Milkshakes and wine don't mix, so she'd say no, and that would allow me to leave the house, alone, for 30 minutes to think. She wouldn't come with me, since she was already half undressed when she got home. Only if they have a Pinot Grigio milkshake. She giggled. Just for you, I'll ask. I forced myself to flirt with her. I'm not sure if they have it. Maybe a pink milkshake would work instead? I continued. One of the best acting jobs I've ever done, I said lightly and flirtatiously, not shaking like a leaf, even though my heart was beating so fast it felt like it was about to jump out of my throat. Oh, of course. Why don't you hurry up and get some milkshakes, and maybe they'll be different a little later, she replied. Grabbing my keys, I smiled at her and headed out the door. 30 minutes to figure out what to do, to map out a revenge plan, to figure out how I could avoid Marie. 30 minutes to at least start planning the rest of my life. I went out and got into Marie's car. She didn't like riding in my truck, so if I took her car, she wasn't likely to follow me if it took a little longer. I dialed the phone number before I even buckled my seatbelt. Hank, how are you? Back from your trip? Greeted my brother Bobby as he picked up the phone. Yeah, Bobby. Bobby, are you alone? Is Sue with you? Yeah, Hank. What's going on? Why are you talking like that, and why are you asking about Sue? His voice was suddenly much more muffled, and the volume lowered. Bobby, if you love me, just tell Sue that I called to say hello, and that you're going to DQ to get something. Please. I need you to meet me there right now. This is one of those situations where you need help hiding your body. Bobby, my 18-month-old older brother, and I were always close, and always joked that if something happened, we would even help each other hide bodies when we were growing up. Bobby was still my best friend, and I was still his. Bobby didn't miss a beat. Suddenly becoming much less cautious and much more exuberant, Bobby replied, Sure, I'll help you with the truck tomorrow. No problem at all. We'll get together early in the morning. If we can make it work, does fishing count? God, Bobby was the fastest man in the world when it came to thinking on his feet. He was the reason I called my older brother. His comment would unexpectedly reassure Sue if she flinched when she heard him react to my voice, and give us a reason to get together tomorrow for a long chat. Fine, but now DQ for Michigan, okay? All right, bro, I'll see you tomorrow at 7 a.m. Bye. I knew this was his way of negotiating extra time and saying he'd be at DQ in a few minutes. He lived closer than I did, so he might even be ahead of me, though I doubted it. I quickly got behind the wheel. I wanted to spend as much time as possible with Bobby when he arrived, but also try to keep the trip relatively short for Marie. He pulled up less than 2 minutes after I did. We got out of our cars and walked to the order window together. Nothing was said between us. He could see I was shivering, but hide the bodies could also be interpreted literally. He wasn't going to ask until we were somewhere away from everyone else. Taking our treats to the farthest table, we sat down and I spoke the words that finally made me realize the reality of the situation. I'm pretty sure Marie is either cheating on me or has cheated on me many times during my trip. Jonathan Goat Williams. Bobby seemed to be prepared for almost anything but that. Well, maybe one thing he was less ready for, the fact that Sue might have cheated. But the thought that Marie could cheat on me was just out of his reach. What? Are you sure? How? When? He pounced on me. I came home and there's butter pecan ice cream in the freezer, mostly empty, a gallon jar. So if she's not cheating, she wants to be a widow. Bobby stared at me, mouth open, for about 10 seconds before he uttered, "Shit." Just one word. But Bobby caught my logic in seconds. Speaking of which, where is it? Right here, I replied, pulling an EPI out of my pocket. How long? Who knows? But this is the first time I've caught on that they seem to have set up house while I've been gone. In the meantime, I need a good excuse not to touch her tonight. I know I can't go on like this, which will make her nervous and let her know that I know something is wrong. I need to not alarm her so I can figure out what's going on. Can you help? Yeah, let me think about it. I watched the wheels turn. Suddenly he smiled. Okay. How do you feel about using near death as an excuse to avoid her for a few days? Huh? I don't get it. Butter pecan. That's the answer. I'll order something that will induce anaphylaxis. I've already paved the way with Sue, told her you were going to DQ, and then told her I wanted one too. We stopped, enjoyed a treat, and you went into shock. I injected you with epinephrine, then took you to the hospital, and we called the girls there. With your history at the hospital, they will keep you overnight. This will help you get through tonight, and you can stay home all day tomorrow and maybe Sunday. Monday, you are on the job, and we can get into action. Tomorrow, I'll make some separate calls for you. Monday, we'll both take the day off and get into action. Sound like the rudiments of a plan? Bobby wasn't allergic. He liked raw walnuts, which wouldn't be as bad as pecans or peanuts, but they would do just fine. Yes, the plan has begun. Go get your walnuts. While he was gone, I finished my milkshake. There was no point in throwing it away, even if it wasn't as tasty as it had been an hour ago. He came back with the smallest ice cream that had walnuts in it. EPI first. I'll wait for your signal, but no more than 2 minutes, okay, bro? And just in case, dude, I love you. I love you too, bro. Best big brother I've ever had. I chuckled, taking one of the little walnut pieces from his ice cream, which he immediately started shoveling into himself. I, Bwayne Fwizz! He shrieked, just as it started in me. The redness, the tingling, the itching, the squeezing, the sudden dryness in my mouth as my tongue swelled, the rumbling in my ears as my heart began to pound frantically. I giggled as the last of the air coming out of me was expelled. There seemed to be no air coming in, and I felt invisible hands clutching my throat, choking me. Silently, trying not to panic, I counted to 20 before I let my hand hit the table. I saw Bobby grab the epinephrine and prepare it. I didn't remember the prick of the needle entering my calf, but I had a last memory of Bobby counting down the seconds as she held the needle in place. My next memory was the fleeting sensation of being in Bobby's car, and after that, of the doctor holding a bright light, looking at my pupils and asking, "Mr. Preston, can you hear me?" After that, things became clearer again. Just as Bobby had predicted, I was kept overnight. Marie was there. She had time to change her clothes when Bobby called her on the way to the hospital and even started my truck. Sue was there too. Marie took me home the next day, and Bobby and Sue brought Marie's truck back later in the afternoon. Bobby stayed close to me, even pulling the two girls aside to take care of his little brother, which I think annoyed Marie. He understood that I didn't want to be alone with her, so he made sure I spent the rest of the weekend with him, except for the hours I slept, pretending to be tired from the trip, and then the hospitalization. I didn't have to pretend for long, as I was exhausted from tossing and turning all night. I remember at one point, Marie was shaking me to wake me up very early Sunday morning, telling me I was frantically twitching and screaming her name. She was worried I was having a nightmare. I, on the other hand, was worried that I wasn't. Monday morning was dreary and dreary, like the rest of my life. I woke up looking better and refreshed and able to get back to work, so I got up and got ready for work, which Marie did. She kissed me as she left, told me she loved me, yeah, right, and I pretended to have forgotten some receipt from a trip that I would need for my expense report, which allowed me to get back in the house. As soon as she left, I texted Bobby that I was free at my house as soon as he got off Sue's back. Bobby took longer to get there than I had anticipated, but I was busy as soon as I called and asked for the day off. I got on the computer and typed "Best Family Law Attorney for Indiana Men" into Google, and several lists came up. I was checking to see who was on each list and who was local or at least semi-local when Bobby arrived. I was particularly pleased that on 4 of the lists I found a woman in the top 3. That was unusual, I thought. Marie and I didn't have children. Thankfully, we plan to start trying next Thanksgiving. Tick-tock goes the biological clock. so there was no need for it to be a male protector. I just needed a man who would fight for me, since I wasn't in the wrong. I also Googled Best Indiana Family Law Attorney. I added them to the list, knowing that I would end up using a free or cheap consultation, so they wouldn't be able to represent Marie when the case won out. Yes, I already knew I would never get over it. Never get over it. Our marriage was ruined the moment I realized what butter pecan meant. Bobby arrived just as I was making my call list. First the top three, then the top three male attorneys. I knew I would end up taking one of them, but as I said, I needed to make sure they wouldn't represent her. The top three were first, simply because I figured I had a better chance of missing them if Marie somehow found out what I was looking for. Hey bro, where are you? I got something for you. Bobby called out to him as he walked into the house. In the office. Come back. Just in case, I minimized my web browser. It was in incognito mode. It closes so quickly and leaves no trace. And minimized my phone list. I didn't need to do that, but I didn't know if he'd be alone when he came over, and he was. Trying to be sneaky, Hank? Good. That's the way you should be. Brought you a present. That's what took so long, he said, holding out a small package to me. Looking into it, I saw a small clock radio, a tiny ceramic dog, 3 miniature tape recorders, and 2 thick pens. What are these? Recording devices. The clock and the dog are cameras, see? He pointed to the small lenses. Dictaphones are small, voice-activated, and can record for up to 8 hours. The pens look like voice recorders, but there are only 2. But they are downloadable via Bluetooth. If you have a cell phone nearby with the appropriate Bluetooth and app, you can record data and automatically dump it, so you don't need to interact with them regularly, just get close enough. The battery lasts for 30 days. I received them from Evan Smallwood this morning. It was because of Evan that I was determined to become a male attorney. He was divorced after his wife, Karen, was caught expanding her horizons and spreading her legs with her boss 2 years ago. I knew he realized something was wrong and took the case after he got the goods, but before he got things quiet. She begged, pleaded, he laughed, and then she destroyed him in the divorce. Indiana is a no-fault state. She got the best lawyer. Evan cheaped out. She used her boss's money so he couldn't sue her for harassment at work. And Evan made the mistake of putting the pictures on the internet. The judge was no laughing matter. Evan didn't go to jail, but it was a close case. Anyway, she cheated, begged him to forgive her, but in the end she got 70%, he got 30% and community service, and still owes her child support while she still spreads her legs for her boss. Isn't life wonderful? That fate didn't suit me, no sir. I wanted revenge, but I didn't want to risk ending up as someone's girlfriend in jail. I have a list of lawyers I want to contact, I replied. So no chance? I didn't think so, knowing you, but a day or two to think about it. No, no chance. One and done. It's always been like that after a hell of a whore. Or maybe I should say the first whore from hell. I grinned wryly. Before Marie, I had only been engaged to my sweetheart Michelle for 6 months. College was great, I thought, for us as a couple, but Michelle soon discovered that it was also a happy hunting ground, or rather a happy entertainment ground, for other guys. When I found out that she'd slept with at least 15 guys since accepting my ring, via a health service announcement that said I had to come in and get tested for chlamydia, I was furious. She didn't even have the guts to tell me in person. She let the health department do it. She cried. I cussed. She said she was just trying to piss off other guys before we bonded. I cussed. And in private, I cried. The 6 months I spent in monasticism after I got my ring back reinforced the idea that I didn't like people playing with my toys or in my playground, and I didn't want to play in someone else's either. I needed a single woman, and I was going to be a single man. While Marie wasn't my fallback when I started dating again, she was the first and only person I became intimate with after Michelle. Marie knew my story. She had heard it told, and we were dating at the time Michelle made her last attempt to get me back. I have little doubt that Michelle loved me in her own way. I just couldn't accept that she also loved others. So Marie knew my history, knew how I would take cheating, and knew my one and done philosophy. Bobby knew too, of course, so his question was a mere formality. And I knew, even better than perhaps his Sue did, that he shared that philosophy, and that if Sue ever cheated, I would help Bobby bring as much death and destruction down on her head as I could. And by golly, I loved Sue as a daughter-in-law. I realized she was perfect for Bobby within a couple of days of meeting her, and I was the one who set them up on their first date 5 months later. The only couple I thought more perfect than Bobby and Sue were Hank and Marie, and we already know the dark thoughts that visited me. We don't have to pounce on her. I don't want to go to jail. Asshole, on the other hand, we might want to go after his ass. But I don't know how we're going to do it. We'll figure it out as we go, bro. At that, Bobby chuckled. I've always been on top of things with my rhymes. I've got skills with rhymes, though. The mood improved. Bobby always knew how to make me laugh. We worked, trying to figure out where to put the two cameras. I didn't think we'd get anything on camera, at least not until the next time I left town. But even then, it was hard to figure out where to put them. I finally decided to put the radio alarm clock by the TV in the bedroom. We didn't use it much, but its presence there wouldn't look too strange. The ceramic dog was a little more difficult. It really didn't go with the various knickknacks in the house, so it took a while. Eventually, I got over it altogether and put it on the closet so that it would be clearly visible from the front door, but not conspicuous. Basically, all it could be used for was to see who entered the house. That got me thinking about how Evan used it. Probably best to put the pen in her car and in her purse. You could also put the recorder under the seat of her car, one in the kitchen somewhere, and one in your spare room. The dog will pick up sounds from the living room, so you already have all the obvious places taken. What do you say, Hank? What's two in the car for? The pen will go in the pen compartment you have when you need to write something down. It'll be a backup. The voice-activated voice recorder will record conversations if she's on speakerphone. You'll be able to put the pen in her purse, right? Maybe. But at least I only have 3 to put away. Let's call the lawyers. Hank and I spent the next hour and a half setting up appointments for the next few days with every lawyer on my list. Fortunately, we were able to meet with one of them at 1 p.m. that day. The attorney's office was not far from Marie's office, so I figured I could sneak into the parking lot outside her work and set up the recorders on my lunch hour. I pulled into the parking lot at noon, and it was here, in retrospect, that my first possible mishap in Operation Don't Trust and Verify occurred. One of Marie's coworkers saw me pull in as she was leaving for lunch and waved me over. With any luck, she would just assume I was taking Marie to lunch and forget I had arrived. I later found out that she mentioned it to Marie 2 days later. After finding Marie's car, I put a pen in the stack of pens in the dashboard drawer and then reached under the seat to put the tape recorder in. I must have caught my hand on one of the seat springs or something because I felt a sharp piece of metal pierce my skin. Oh, shit. I tucked the recorder under the seat, removed my arm completely, and blotted a small amount of blood with a tissue. Then I locked and closed the door and headed to my appointment. I met the lawyer at 1:45. Why do doctors and lawyers always keep people waiting? I told him everything except that I would have several attorneys to talk to. He basically rolled his eyes at the butter pecan evidence and disagreed that I might know what I was talking about. He was certainly willing to give me an upfront payment if I wanted, but said no judge would buy it. I went into the new bank to do a few preliminary things, like open another account, and then went for a walk somewhere until it was the right time to come home. Life went on for the rest of the week. I managed to check the 2 cameras daily, they only showed my wife and I, as well as the kitchen recorder, once, and the recorder in the spare room, once. The dictaphone in the spare room showed nothing, and the kitchen one only recorded meaningless conversations between Marie and me. I got close enough to Marie's car to connect my phone to the pen in the car, but when I listened to the conversation, it only had our conversation with her on Wednesday and nothing else. The conversation went as follows: the sound of a door closing, the sound of a door opening, the sound of someone getting into the car, then the door closing, the car starting, some kind of road noise. Brr, 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 ballop, my voice. Hey, baby, where are you now? Near work. Why, what's up? I'm craving some Chinese food. Would you mind stopping and picking it up if I order ahead? Sure. Kung Pao chicken and maybe shrimp toast? Okay, I'm buying. You're flying. I'll see you when you get home, Marie. Okay, honey. Love you, bye. And there were still the sounds of doors opening and closing, the occasional road noise, but that was it. On Friday, I finally managed to arrange to drive Marie's car to the DQ where I met Bobby. We pulled the recorder out from under the seat and pressed the play button. The voice-activated recorder under the seat was a little different. My voice. Oh, shit. I immediately knew something was wrong. I couldn't hear myself on the knob as I hooked my arm. The next sounds were a rustling, a door closing. The door opened, someone came in, the door closed. The noise of the road. Car stopping, door opening, door closing, car starting, road noise. And then the conversation that ended it. Brr, 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 ballop, Jonathan Williams's voice. Hello. Hey, stud. I was just getting warm thinking about you. The traitorous tramp cooed gesturingly. God, you were so good last week. I wish Hank hadn't come back for another 3 weeks. All right, all right. Just when can we get together again? Right now, I don't know. It totally depends on Hank's schedule. And right now, he doesn't have anything on his schedule. It's no more than every 2 months, but he's been gone for 3 weeks. I don't think he'll be sent out again for a while. 2 months? Oh no. You'll have to wait. Marie scolded him. Oh, Marie, don't be like that. You know I can't resist you and you can't resist me. I've been resisting you pretty well for the last 15 years. Just because I finally let you have some doesn't mean I can't shut you back up if you get too pushy. Yes, I enjoyed our happy little adventure with domesticity, but I've gotten along just fine without it all these years. I can do it again. And there it was. She acknowledged it. But it was also obvious that this was really the first time they were living together. That wasn't to say that there hadn't been something shorter before, but it was safe to say that this was the first time she'd gone completely off the deep end, at least with Zazran's. Look, I'm going to let you go. Hank was sick over the weekend, and even though we dealt with it last night, it's not enough. I heard Williams whimper slightly at that. I intend to rock his world tonight, and I only called to recharge a little to start, and to let you know that you don't have to call me. I'll call you next time he's gone. I still love you, Marie. I know I messed up, but I still love you. I love you too, Jonathan. But I love Hank. You're just a reminder of what could have been if you could have kept it in your pants back then. Marie, you must feel more for me than you do for Hank. After all, you were with me while he was gone. You were my wife, not his, while he was gone. You, until he was gone. Until he was gone. I heard her repeat it with emphasis in her voice. I took nothing from the time I spent with him. He wasn't there. And then I let you use the unused scraps of my emotions, my love, my lust. Yes, I still feel something for you, Jonathan, but I don't love you. I love Hank. Great way to show it, you mistrustful slut, I thought. I'll take what I can get. Bye, Jonathan. I'll call you soon, and I'll see you next time Hank leaves. The noise of the road. The car stopped. The door opened. And then it all became clear why this last conversation hadn't been recorded on the pen. What is it? Marie's question lacked context, so I didn't know what she was looking at. What? The sound of a click. A click. A click. What the hell? Shit. She was silent for a moment. Why does it have to be here? Does it really? And then silence. I don't know if the recorder turned off or if it was running continuously, but after a moment she was back. It's him, she muttered. Shit. Hank must have put it here. And I realized she'd discovered one of the bugs. Judging by what we'd already pulled out of them, she realized the pen was a bug. I was suddenly glad I hadn't had time to plant one of the bugs in her purse. Okay, entering pin, 1234, that's it. Erase the entry, done. Shit, I'll have to redo this tomorrow. The sound of a door closing. The sound of a door opening. The sound of someone getting into a car, then the door closing, the car starting. The sound of the road. The sound of a car stopping, a door opening and closing. That must have been her driving to work on Wednesday. The sound of the door closing. The sound of a door opening. The sound of someone getting into a car, then the door closing, the car starting. Some kind of road noise. Brrr, 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 baloop. My voice again, almost certainly from the Kung Pao chicken conversation. Hey, baby, where are you now? Near work. Why, what's up? I'm craving some Chinese food. Would you mind stopping and picking it up if I order ahead? Sure. Kung Pao chicken and maybe shrimp toast? Okay, I'm buying. You're flying. I'll see you when you get home, Marie. Okay, honey. Love you, bye. There were still sounds of doors opening and closing, the occasional road noise, but that was it. And I realized. She'd found the pen, but not the tape recorder. She'd erased one recording, or at least the conversation she'd heard, but not the other. Bobby looked at me. She knows you suspect something. She found the pen. Has she acted any differently since Tuesday? Although I've gotten more from her in the last week than I did all of last year, including her birthday. That's not serious, bro. But how have you been acting? Have you been able to keep your cool? I was Rain Man, bro, in a Tuesday Wapner kind of way. I didn't know anything and was as normal as I could be, but she must think I'm the love child of Rainman and Forrest Gump. Bobby laughed, which diffused the situation. Oddly, he was more tense than I was after we found out the truth, but what is, is. Okay, Bubba Gump, you're definitely good with ignorance. Just don't start talking about shrimp, or about Kmart. And we both laughed. It felt good to laugh. In that moment, with Bobby, I knew everything was going to be okay. No matter what happened, I knew I had someone who would always be there for me, always keep me grounded. It wasn't necessarily someone I wanted to always have by my side, as I couldn't imagine Bobby looking good in a little black dress, and he definitely wouldn't be someone who would shake my world at night. But it was something I could hold on to during the dark days I assumed would be ahead. So I found 4 out of 6 lawyers. I think I could use this one. There's no way she's going to do anything in the house, and she's smart enough not to look in the house for hidden cameras and microphones and such. We screwed up with the pen, but I think that's enough. What do you think, Bobby? I think I'm following your lead, little brother. You're running things. I'll back you up. I'll give you an alibi. I'll help you hide the bitch's body or Williams. Whatever you say, bro. Bros, faithful wives, cheaters, then assholes. Bros first. Hell, I'll even be your cellmate, but I'll get the bottom bunks and you'll just be the bottom if it comes to that. Hell no, bro. Hell no. I laughed along with him. The darkest and most destructive thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm joking with my brother about gay prison. That's friendship. That's love. That's my brother Bobby. But back to the main thing, bitches. I want to destroy asshole and burn that bitch down. We need a plan. But I'd rather we didn't end up cellmates. My smile didn't come off my face for a few seconds, and Bobby let it. But when it started to fade, Bobby stopped smiling too, and we started making plans. So, what does asshole have that we can destroy? Besides Marie. Sorry, besides that bitch. Well, let's go in order. He has his life. Bobby nodded. He has his health. He has his apartment. He has his job. He has his car. He's got his reputation. That's it. At this, I paused. That car. I think he values it almost more than himself, and even more than his place or his job. Definitely above his place, since he bought this place so he could have a garage to store the damn thing and work on it. Bobby and I were referring to a classic 1969 Plymouth Barracuda convertible Sierra Ton Poly, also known as Brown, with the so-called CUDA package and a big 440 big block engine. It was a rare version of one of the hottest cars of its era. While it wasn't the same Barracuda that became world famous, it was the next 1970 CUDAs. It was the one that started the Barracuda's fame, equipped with the last powerful engine before the legendary Hemi came along. The car wasn't worth $800,000 like one of the 70 CUDAs, but in the condition he kept it in, it was worth $90,000 to $100,000. He inherited the car from his grandfather, who unfortunately had a stroke a week after buying it in 1969. His grandfather was never able to drive it, but he wouldn't sell it either. And when he died in 2007, Asshole inherited a nearly 40-year-old Barracuda with only 132 miles on it. It was a mess in some ways, but it was still a brand new classic car. Mudok has probably added 2,500 miles to the odometer since then, but used it very, very rarely. I'm a Corvette lover, and Bobby is a Mustang lover, but Asshole really had one of the classic cars, while we dreamed of a Stingray, me, or a Mach-I, Bobby. Yes, losing this car would be very painful, but I can't just destroy such a beauty. The CUDA didn't do anything to me, only to the asshole who owned it. It's a good old peebcac, though I'd say it's more of an Abesapi problem with the CUDA. Abesapi? The ass between the steering wheel and the pedal? I grinned at him as he realized. So, no damage to the car per se, but deny him that. How do we do that? Steal it? Have it shipped to some deserving millionaire? I like your train of thought, but I don't know anyone we could sell it to, and I'm not sure we wouldn't end up in jail if we stole it. Does Evan know anyone, Bobby? I mean, he's still dealing with the fallout from his hellish bitching. Maybe he knows someone. After all, if I'm out of town, I'll have an alibi, and we know there's a chance Asshole and the whore will get together. I don't think that's going to happen right now, brother. She knows you're suspicious because she found the pen. She'll look for the cameras and eventually find them, I think. She'll be on her usual behavior because she doesn't know for sure what you know, only that you're suspicious. So she'll be a good wife for a while. Well, if you want to stay with her for a year or two, then woof. That woof is woof, up to you. And he coughed slightly, which sounded suspiciously like the word woof. The subtle chicken woof told me he was thinking of that option. His not-so-subtle way of saying that if I don't leave her, I'm a coward and a scoundrel. Of course, a fake trip followed a week or so later by the removal of all the bugs might make her think she got away with it. The trip would imply that you're trying to get her to back off, and the removal a week after the trip would imply that you didn't find anything and decided that whatever made you suspicious was wrong, and you don't want her to find the bugs and start something based on wrong suspicions. That could turn her thinking upside down. I'm just not sure I'm in a good enough frame of mind to stay with her. The call makes it clear that she thinks she loves me. I'm not sure I agree that she can sleep with asshole while I'm gone, but she thinks she does. Maybe she'll never do it again, realizing how close she came to doing it. Or she'll become more cunning, and I'll never be able to catch her again. But one way or another, we have to catch asshole, and as soon as possible. All right, let's think about it overnight. Tomorrow morning, you and I will meet up, go fishing or something. In the meantime, from now on, you and I need to sweep our cars every day and only talk about this on our work phones or in person. She can just stick a tape recorder on you or me if she figures out how to do it. I actually think we should take the boat out and fish tomorrow. We'll leave our phones in the car too. You're not going to make me Fredo, are you? You're not going to put me out of my misery? I asked, referring to Fredo's fate in The Godfather Part 2. I'll make you an offer you can't refuse, joked Bobby in response. We hugged and agreed to meet at 7 the next morning to fish. There was nothing unusual about this, so it wouldn't upset Sue in the least. But Marie might have been worried, as she should have been. That night, Marie tore me into the sheets again, leaving me a shivering mess. As she curled around me and lay on top of me as I dozed off, I remember her shaking gently in my arms and hearing her whisper softly to me when she thought I was asleep. I'm so sorry, Hank. I love you, just you. I could feel the moisture from her tears on my chest. It was a shitty world where she cheated, knew I suspected it, and yet neither of us could talk about it. Life, huh? My dreams that night were the most pleasant I'd had since I got back from my trip. I vividly remember driving asshole's Cuda at high speed down a long road, being picked up by some nameless and faceless woman who smelled like Marie's hair, and the light rain from a cloudless sky wetting my chest. It is one of the most vivid dreams I think I have ever had. I think I understand what the dream means and where parts of it come from, but neither before nor later have I ever seen smells in my dreams. But the smell of Marie's shampoo always stood out to me from that dream. When I felt the vibration from my smartwatch waking me up at 6 a.m., Marie wasn't in bed, but I could smell bacon cooking. Although Marie often cooked in the mornings, she rarely cooked on the days I was away fishing. She usually stayed in bed and slept until I left. I would even return from short fishing trips and find her asleep in bed at 11 or so when the weather changed, and we cut the trip short. After getting dressed for fishing, I made my way to the kitchen and saw Marie finishing making a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich and a thermos of hot coffee. The beer cooler was already by the garage door, and looking at the cardboard in the trash can, I realized she had put a whole 12-bottle Bud pack in it, probably along with a couple of sandwiches and other snacks. She was trying to be the perfect wife, and in doing so, she knew I either knew or suspected the elephant in the room. I spent a few minutes with her. Time I usually spent icing beers, making sandwiches, and waiting in line at McDonald's for a sandwich and coffee for breakfast before meeting Bobby, to talk to her. She was affectionate, sweet, and yet much more shy than I was used to for a woman I'd been with for so long. I could see the fear in her eyes, for the first time ever, and could almost hear the desperation in her voice as she rushed to me to kiss me, repeating between kisses, I love you, Hank. For my part, I returned the kisses, though not as desperately, and said simply, I love you too. It wasn't a lie. I hated her. I loved her. I hate what she did. I love that she's with me. I hate what she turned me into. I love how she made me feel in the years we were together. It's a two-faced dichotomy, one of those Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde things. I left and met Bobby at the spot on the Big Blue River where we used to put his boat in. He had just finished launching the boat and was pulling into the parking lot when I pulled up. When I saw where he was, I parked, threw my phone on the seat of the truck, grabbed my cooler and coffee, and walked down to the boat. He had already put his fishing rods and tackle aboard. Bobby joined me a minute later, and I held my hand like a phone, then looked at him. Blushing, he turned around and walked to his truck, returning a minute later. Leaving the cell phone behind was your idea. Getting decrepit, old man. I gently chided him as he climbed into the boat. He looked at me with a sour expression, reached into the refrigerator and grabbed a Bud. Unscrewing the lid and taking a sip, he drank half the can. Too little alcohol in my blood to function this early on the water. But it's about 5 o'clock now, he replied. Yeah, maybe in India or something. Don't you think it's a little early or a little late to get into the Bud now? Besides, I snapped back, starting the motor and pulling away from shore. I thought I was the one who was supposed to be drinking round the clock. I'm just getting a head start. Gotta keep you from becoming an alki. Don't you want to drink for 10 hours? he joked back. Yeah, but I think you're still on the 10-second chip. Clean and sober are two things that wouldn't describe us by the middle of the day. Cheers. I picked up my coffee cup. Bobby grinned and finished the can. Of course, if you keep this up, I think we're going to need a bigger boat, I joked, quoting Jaws. But it'll be for your empty cans. And we'll need more beer. Don't worry, the beer's here, he objected, opening the wet-bottomed refrigerator. I didn't plan on us catching a lot of fish today. I didn't even bring any bait with me. I snickered at that. Man, we got out on the river and headed upstream to the turnoff at Mill Pond. Although Mill Pond was a popular fishing spot, the bend increased the current south of the pond, causing fewer fish in that spot. I, for one, wish you'd brought bait with you, preferably an asshole. Even though life is crappy, a nice base would still be a nice distraction, and I bet Marie would even cook it for me. That was weird. I realized that it was the first time I'd ever called her Marie in all my time with Bobby. I knew I shouldn't call her a bitch, a slut, a whore, a harlot, a cheater, a cunt to her face, or in front of anyone but Bobby and probably Evan. But I was taking some of my anger, some of my rage, some of my pain out on Bobby by calling her that. I wondered for a second if my dream had something to do with not calling her bad names until Bobby interrupted my reverie. So, I've been thinking. I think I know how we can do this. Do what? Remove the scrotal sac and all the associated appendages from Jonathan Williams? Well, sort of. But I was more referring to the machine. You can tilt it so he loses something, but that depends on him doing something too, which I can't guarantee. But Grand Theft CUDA? Yeah, I've got that one figured out. I spent half the night thinking about it. Witness the fact that since I haven't slept, it's still yesterday, so this, and he pointed to his empty can of beer, isn't too early, it's just a very late Friday night beer. Oh, Grand Master of Beer Justification, what's your idea? I asked him with a clever look. We'll arrange for it to be stolen at a car show. No one will think twice if they see someone hitch it up and drive it away toward the end of the car show. He can't resist showing it off, so we'll just talk him into taking it to the show. Invite a couple guys in jackets that say something like, I don't know, CUDA Classics or something like that, and distract asshole while they load it up at the end of the show. It's always chaos at these events. But who the hell would steal a classic car from a show, and even out in the open? We asked them to take it safely to some storage facility rented in his name and leave it there for 6 months. In the short term, he would file a theft report, get a payout from the insurance company, and the car would sit in a storage unit rented in his name. A month or two after he gets the insurance, the police will find him, and he and Bubba will be serving time in the big house for insurance fraud. Okay, let me think about that for a second. No. I see too many problems for such a complicated piece of shit. Besides, just his name in the department won't be enough. See, that's the beauty of it. You can just arrange for the key to the device to be on the keyboard at his house, still labeled with the tag. So, since I know you're going to take it apart, here's the deal. What you may not know, because you didn't know Marie very well back then, is that Evan's cousin Darla is the same girl that asshole cheated on Marie with. Darla was a freshman and grew up in Oklahoma. You met Darla several times over the years. Darla didn't know that asshole had an affair with Marie, at least according to Darla when they were dating. She thought she was asshole's girlfriend, so you can imagine her surprise when Marie slapped her when she found out. According to Darla, asshole lied to Marie, telling her that it was Darla who started and pursued him. Darla had rarely dated before, and asshole was her first, so she felt betrayed by the fact that he lied to Marie about her, and she got slapped for it. She blames Marie a little, but she hates Williams. And Darla, hell, that whole family, they hold a grudge. You've never been a friend to Evan, and you were nice to Darla when you were dating. She likes you, as in, she likes most people she doesn't think have wronged her, but she holds a grudge. Okay, so you, me, Evan, and Darla all want to bring the sky down on asshole. But what does that have to do with the car? That's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. Darla owns a couple warehouses, or at least her husband does. Darla even runs one of them. And Darla knows where we can get a couple guys to move the car. The storage units have cameras. So when the police start snooping around, they'll look at the camera footage and see that we paid for the space, and they'll see us or anyone else removing the car. They won't see the asshole. But here's the thing. Guess which storage center is closest to William's house? It's not the one Darla runs, it's the one she and her husband own. She can arrange to take it for one weekend and take the cameras out. It will take a few days to diagnose the bad cable, but we rent a room the next day, so the camera will be out when we do. She won't be there when we do, so there's no connection between the camera failure, her and us. Okay, So we rent the unit. We can hide the rest of the stuff too, I think. Like the license to the truck carrying the car. We'll make sure no one looks in the direction of the camera while they take the car off the trailer and into the block. That makes sense. Someone might even dress like asshole earlier in the day if we can figure it out, so it'll be more obvious. Hell, we could even take pictures of him on display with the car so the police could see how he was dressed. I was starting to like the idea. Now you're thinking straight. The key is how long he gets distracted long enough to steal the car, and how long to wait before an anonymous tip or whatever method we use to have the car discovered if the police don't discover it themselves. It seemed to Bobby that most of the answers to these questions had already been found, but I saw one that still remained open. That leaves the question of the key. How do we make sure he has the key at his house? Okay, I still don't know how to do that. I think we should just put it on a keychain right before we notify the police, but I don't know how to do that yet. You'll have to figure out some steps yourself. Underwear theft? Question marks? Profit? Is that what you mean? I'm not an underwear dwarf, Bobby, I replied, referring to an old episode of South Park. Hey, I only see 3 question marks and one little problem that only you can find a solution to. The key situation, the distraction, and our alibi, and then the problem. What problem? Can you stay calm long enough to pull this off? You won't be able to do anything to Marie until he's in jail, and you won't be able to do anything that will make the police pay attention to you. When his car goes missing, if you're divorced because of him, you'll be the prime suspect. The cops don't care if Marie's slutty or not. They care about the stolen car. And from the way he treated Darla, asshole will throw Marie under the bus if he thinks you stole the car. You know, that would be perfect. Get him to throw her under the bus. I could use that to push the divorce if he went on record saying he thought I had something to do with it because he entertained her, and I wanted revenge. That could have worked very well. Bobby blurted out in the biggest, most sinister grin I'd ever seen on his face. Lead the horse to water, and eventually he'll find it and get drunk. Now you understand what my ultimate goal is. Wait, have you thought of that yet? You bastard! Why didn't you go for it in the first place? I hissed. Because I needed you to see there was a way out. Once you do, you'll realize you can pull this off with Marie. When the car disappears, we'll hint to Zazranch that you did it, or start a rumor that you had something to do with it, so it'll get to him. He'll turn you into the cops and end up giving Marie a good beating before the hammer comes down on her. Pass me the bud. Time to celebrate. I smiled back at him. It was a good morning for fishing and drinking. Bobby volunteered to be the liaison between the various people involved in the case and keep things on track for the next week. I made arrangements with an attorney, a shark woman, and she prepared the paperwork, but didn't date or file it. Once I saw Evan, he looked at me and smiled. We didn't say anything. He just smiled. I knew he was thinking about getting revenge on all those assholes who sleep with other people's wives, and it was the first time I'd ever seen him really smile. It was gratifying in its own way. Meanwhile, Marie was still trying to spoil me, and the bugs weren't picking up anything new. I was constantly looking for items on me or in the truck that might have been designed to flip the table and bug me. I guess that made me paranoid. If Marie really loved me and didn't want to lose me, she would act normal and try not to give me any reason to think she didn't trust me. That's not to say she wasn't trying. But if I had to guess, I'd figure she was waiting for me to get rid of my suspicions. The pen and the recorder under the seat always matched, and I started counting the number of times I'd driven the car. There were a few more than I expected, but all the conversations they picked up were innocuous, and both sets of recordings started with me giving the date they were last reset, so I knew they hadn't been tampered with. For my part, I couldn't act 100% normal with her, but I didn't let my anger out of the bottle either. The most interesting part, in my opinion, was that the car show came to our attention unplanned. It turned out that in 2 weeks there was a local show, smaller but still quite large, that was being held to benefit the local Peyton Manning Children's Hospital. The asshole signed up to show off his car, and it was a great opportunity. I was deliberately kept out of it. My revenge would fail if, during the police interrogation, I blabbed and said something that showed I knew too much, but it also increased my anxiety. I didn't know what dotted the T's and crossed the I's, or vice versa. Hopefully the other way around. And all this was happening at a time when I still had to put up with Marie and somehow maintain a semblance of normalcy around her. She saw right through it, I know, but since she didn't know what I knew and couldn't confess what she'd done, she didn't know if it was just dark thoughts and suspicions or concrete evidence. One thing, however, I decided separately from Bobby. I was going to leave the recorders and cameras until a couple of weeks after the show. I didn't think they'd catch anything now, but taking them away too suddenly when she knew I was looking would likely be a serious signal that I already had her own damn voice talking about her affair. While they were at it, she might have thought it was just suspicion. The night before the car show, Evan coincidentally showed up at the same place where Bobby coincidentally showed up at DQ, and I coincidentally showed up a few minutes later. What a coincidence, huh? Bobby and I didn't talk about what was going on near our cell phones, or really anywhere that might be bugged, so we'd only discussed the usual stuff lately, but I knew I needed to be aware. Hank, you need to be the one to set this off. You need to be the distraction. Evan and his friend, who you won't be dating, will be the guys who trailer the car. I'll be the asshole in the vault video. However, I need something from you. I need you to send me a picture of him by the car. I have a burner phone. And he held it out to me, with one number preset to another of mine. I'll match his clothes to the best of my ability, add dark glasses and a Colts cap. Given the quality of the video, that should be enough. We need you to stay visible and be seen. The only shot you'll take with this camera is of him in the car. You'll throw your phone away at the gas station on the way home, okay? But I need you to take lots of pictures throughout the day, talk to people, get business cards, even give your number to some of the vet guys a few times. Make sure people see you and remember you. Get your picture taken on camera as early as you can, because it might take a while to pick out your clothes. Okay, that's understandable, but what about distractions? What do I have to do for that? You'll have to improvise a bit. There has to be something that can distract him for 10 minutes or so. Maybe negotiate a prize for the best 1960s cars from each make. The Barracuda may not be a 1970, but it's probably the best 1960s Mopar. Give $100 for each 1960s Chevy, Ford, or Dodge best in show. $300 you can write off on your taxes. Organize the awards there, with the awards ceremony taking place at, say, 5:30, but you have to be there to pick it up. How does that sound? Improvise, damn it. You just told me everything that needs to be done. That's the plan. I'll even make the Mopar last so I can pull it longer to the main tent. If I do it right and talk for a minute about the great muscle cars of the 1960s, and then each guy tells me exactly why his car was the king of the 60s, I can stretch it into a half hour. See, that's what I meant about improv. Evan added with a laugh. Williams is probably good for half an hour by himself, not to mention the Corvette and Mustang guys. But if you don't include the GOAT, you're going to piss somebody off. You said Chevy, Ford, Dodge. You've got to include Pontiac for the GTO and Firebirds. Okay, now that's what, $400. Why don't I make it $500, and we'll have a vote among the marquee audience to determine who gets the extra 100. Although it pisses me off to give $100 to Modoc for entertaining my wife. Money well spent if he's Bubba's cellmate. And you'll have an ironclad alibi. Bobby was right, of course. If it set Williams up, it was worth it. The next day started well, with clear blue skies, moderate temperatures, and bright and cheerful sunshine. I swear I thought I heard robins chirping, so bright and beautiful everything was. I thought so because I knew that today was the day Jonathan Asshole Williams would begin the rest of his life without his prize Barracuda. It was just a gorgeous day. I couldn't believe the forecast on the radio as I drove to the car show. Cloudy, 30% chance of precipitation, mid to upper 50-degree temperature. As someone once said, I reject that reality and replace it with my own. After paying my fee, I walked over to where Williams was working on creating a presentation area around his car. Walking past him, I quickly snapped a photo of him in the car, then sent a text to Bobby. Moments later, I got a reply. Got it. LMK4 showtime, which I translated as, let me know what time you're going to do the presentation so we can pick up the car then. After that, I walked over to the main admin tent. Hi guys, my name is Hank Preston, and I have a suggestion. I'd like to present a small award today to the best 1960s cars from Chevy, Ford, Pontiac, and Chrysler Plymouth. This would attract some extra interest. I'm willing to donate $100 for each winner, and then have a vote for the best among the four for an additional $100. All I ask is that it be considered a charity, as it would raise the excitement level. I've got the money right here, in clean new bills, I said, holding out the $100 bills. I think we can do that. What time would you like to do it, and how would we judge? One of the lead volunteers asked. We'll hand out tickets to people, have them drop them in a bucket or hat of their choice. The winners with the most votes in each category will win, and then we'll determine the final winner by vote? It should be simple enough, I replied. Tim will carry this roll of tickets all the way to the entrance. Have them hand out tickets to everyone who comes in and explain what they are for. Maggie, why don't you tell everyone who wants one why they should hold these tickets? We'll do the counting and voting at, say, 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Sounds good to me. Just need a receipt for taxes. I smiled. All according to plan. Leaving the tent, I texted 5 p.m. to the preset. A minute later, I got a reply, "Okay, drop your phone at the gas station on the way home." Since it was still early, I wandered over to the cars and spent a long time drooling over a 1963 Stingray with split rear windows, painted metallic blue, and a 1967 Stingray convertible with a 454 engine in canary yellow. I had a hard time deciding which one was more worthy. I took pictures with my cell phone, picked up maps, pondered the for sale sign on the silver fuel-injected 1965 Stingray, the last year that fuel injection could be installed on Corvettes until 1982. It tempted me very much. There weren't many other vets there, only 5 in the category, but it was still a reunion with the ones I'd been dreaming of since I was a kid. Of the other Chevys, I was surprised at how good the 1962 Impala looked. It definitely would have won if it weren't for the 3 vets I mentioned. And indeed, it was spot on. I found a car for Bobby as well, a green 1969 Mustang Mach-1 Fastback. It was even listed for sale, but after seeing the price, I decided not to tell Bobby about it. He wouldn't live to see it, because Sue would kill him for that price. In that case, I'd better leave the sleeping dogs lying around, and the pony cars for sale will go to someone else. If I can't take the Fuelie, then he can't take Mach-1, okay? There were also a decent number of mid-60s Stangs here, even one 1964.5 convertible that was definitely interesting, but the Mach, I was the star. Perhaps if there had been a Shelby or Eleanor, but there weren't. Of the other Fords, only one Galaxy 500 really stood out. I didn't just sit around all day, I made myself memorable, made some new friends, and talked about my favorites in the 4 categories to some of the other people walking around. It was a lot of fun when I finally found both a blue 1967 Firebird and a red, of course, 1968 GTO in the Pontiac set that were really cherry. I whispered to an older guy with a goat that he might want to put a little bit of the Beach Boys on his cell phone as background music. If he created a little playlist, he could put their version of Little GTO on in the background. He liked the idea. When I was walking by again later, I heard the end of the loop he had made. I loved it, and stayed long enough for Little Old Lady from Pasadena to kick in. What was especially fun was an elderly couple walking by when this song started. She started laughing and asked if she could borrow the goat for a while she took it to church. While she was talking, I mentioned that she should look at the Barracuda since it's a Mopar, closer to a supercharged Dodge, which in retrospect may not have been the best idea. It was obvious to me that either the Firebird or Goat would win in the Pontiac group. However, the Barracuda had little competition, which was a problem. I needed to keep the Goat in the tent as long as possible. There was a 1968 Dodge Super Bee, green as an avocado and with a big 426 Hemi. It was the rarest example of the car at the show, and it was the pride and joy of the owner. It had only one major flaw, at least as a concourse car. Some owner along the way had taken out the original radio and added a newer one, and an ancient 8-track turntable that wasn't in the car. This damaged the dashboard a bit, and the owner has yet to have the dashboard and carpeting repaired. In addition, the car had no original wheels, and instead had 5-spoke rims with hubcaps that looked suspiciously, in my opinion, like mid-1960s Stingray rims. They looked not bad, I suppose, but they detracted from the car. I mentioned it to a few people and probably ruined what could have been a friendship when the owner heard me. I really liked the Super Bee, but the Barracuda was going to win. I started to get nervous around 4 p.m. I realized that no crime had been committed yet, but in less than 2 hours, I would be an accessory both before and after the fact to a crime in Grand Theft Auto, even if I wasn't guilty of it myself. I remembered Bobby and how he had helped me hide the bodies. I remembered Evan and how upset he had been by his wife's cheating, and how much Marie's betrayal had angered and hurt me. I also realized that at this point I could pretend that nothing had happened with Marie and continue to lie to myself and others. But if we were going to go through with this, I needed Williams to suspect me, regardless of my alibi. I needed him to get to the point where he betrayed Marie to me and everyone else. And so the time had come. I was nervous, but relieved when I saw Jonathan Asshole enter the tent. Everything had been decided, and whatever was going to happen, would happen. I sent one last quick text, "Go," and that was it. Despite the fact that I was supposed to become less calm, I felt a warm sense of relaxation sweep over me. The Super Bee owner frowned when he saw me with the judges, I also saw the owners of the three top vets, the owners of the 64.5, Stang and Mach 1, the Impala owner, the Firebird and Goat owners, and I saw him. He saw me at that moment, perhaps for the first time, realizing that I had funded this little prize. After a moment, he grinned, and at that moment, I wished like hell that Super B had beaten him to it. I gave a little speech, talking about how the 1960s was the greatest era in automotive history. I heard the guy showing off his 1993 Porsche 911 laugh about it, and how Detroit steel ruled the roads. I then invited all the owners who had tickets to bring them in to be counted, and there was a small line of people lined up in front of each one that the people running the show had taken to count the tickets. I got a little tweaked and asked each person as they brought up their tickets to say a few words about their car. A strange difference showed up in the way they talked about their cars. A couple guys started quoting chapter and verse about the car, the drivetrain, who designed it, how many were made. A few didn't talk about the car in general, but specifically about theirs as a special specimen. And some talked not so much about the car, but about memories associated with it. Many were family or friends' cars, not collected from strangers, but with personal significance to the owner. I was impressed that the guy with the 1962 Impala mentioned that his dad proposed to his mom in that car, and that they used it for weddings, honeymoons, and to bring the kids home from the hospital. The last time his father drove it was to his mother's funeral, and then gave it to him a week later. Tears came to the eyes of those present. Williams followed a moment later. He could talk about growing up seeing this car idling, his grandfather's dream car, while his grandfather withers after a stroke. He could have talked about what made the car special in other ways, why it was unique or rare or desirable. He could have talked about the restoration, but he didn't. He talked, and I quote, about how women seem to love this car. There's something about seeing it and hearing the song Barracuda by Fleetwood Mac, and they just melt. There's nothing better for a bachelor than a hot car. The song dropped with a clatter, and someone in the back yelled, "That's Heart, asshole, not Fleetwood Mac, and it has nothing to do with the car." I think that got more laughter than applause. Marie cheated on me with this piece of shit? Really? When the voting was over, and it stretched for a full 20 minutes as the judges made sure everyone had time to talk about their car, you could see that people were starting to get excited about some of the cars. And then they let me name the winners. I wasn't expecting it, but it was fun to present each winner with a small certificate printed at the show, a small blue ribbon, and a crisp $100 bill. The Mach-I car was named first. They didn't give me the numbers, but it was clear that the Mach-I dominated the Fords. I was surprised when the Impala won over the top two vets, a 63 and a 67, but it was also clear that the owner had been telling the story all day. I think it got a lot of votes from the ladies and a few men because the car looked so good and had a beautiful story attached to it. The GTO won out over the Pontiac, but you could tell it was close. People in the tent were arguing over who would win. And then the Mopars showed up. Someone in the back yelled that there should be one for Dodge and one for Plymouth since I had separated the Pontiacs from the Chevys. He was clearly biased since he was wearing an "It's a Hemi" t-shirt. I relented and simply replied that I didn't have an infinite amount of money and needed to draw the line somewhere. The time was approaching 5:30, so I knew it wouldn't take me long to pull Williams into the tent and away from the CUDA. And then it happened. Super B won the Mopar group. We weren't done in the tent yet, but I didn't have the option of stretching out Williams' time in the tent. He was free to leave, or be a good sport, and see who got the last prize. Best of the 60s. It would just be another ribbon, another certificate, plus one last $100 bill, but it would still be fun. And Williams was gone. I was going to be there to utilize the volume vote in a crowd that still numbered at least 70 people, most of those who had been there from the beginning. I took that opportunity, even as I suddenly began to sweat over the situation. 5 minutes to the car, 5 minutes to figure out what had happened, then a couple more. My world might have changed a lot in the next 15 minutes, but I was in front of everyone, in that tent, the whole time. My alibi was solid, but it wouldn't stand up to a grand theft auto conspiracy charge. I knew I had to keep my cool and be as shocked by the audacious theft as everyone else. So I played my part. I asked each of the 4 winners to come up and stand across from me. I raised my hand over each of them, first over the GTO, which drew a round of applause. I switched to the Mach-1, which received a little more. I raised my hand over the Super B, which got a good response, but was clearly third after the other 2. And then I did the Impala. Personally, I thought the Impala was beautiful, but not a true muscle car. My vote would have gone to the 63 Coupe with split rear windows, which I'd hardly call best in show. But my vote didn't count here. The crowd cheered loudly and emphatically for the Impala, and as soon as they did, the Mackay owner turned and shook the man's hand. It was obvious who had won. I was grinning from ear to ear as I shook his hand and presented the prizes. One of the other contestants also brought a can of liquid glass car wax and handed it to him. It was obvious he was touched. He knew the car was good, but it was the story that made it the best car at the show and got the audience's attention. Just as he approached the microphone to say how happy he was, Williams burst in, yelling that his car had been stolen. I felt uneasy. The owner of the Impala, Thomas Warner. He'd enjoyed the hell out of the moment up to that point, but the commotion as people drove away was an awesome sight. But as he was about to leave, he turned to me and said, "Hank, he really is an asshole, isn't he? But my wife is going to enjoy her $200. Thanks." He winked at me and walked away. Although he had heard my name mentioned, we had barely spoken before, so I was surprised that he called me Hank, or that he knew my impression and opinion of Williams. I joined the crowd walking to where the CUDA was standing. I walked all around the neighborhood looking at things and made sure many others did as well. I guess I had watched too many crime shows and wanted to make sure the crime scene was as contaminated as possible with strangers and things. I even accidentally punched a 10-year-old in the arm, causing him to spill a box of popcorn. While apologizing, I made sure to step on the only tire track visible from the scene, destroying the evidence. Some of the popcorn was there too. I gave him enough money to buy a new box since it was my fault. Only when the police arrived, Williams didn't even look in my direction. The crowd thinned to about half as they got there. I heard what prompted the push. It was one of the officers. "Do you know anyone who would want to harm you or steal your car? Do you have any enemies?" At this point, Asshole looked at me. "I have one person I can think of. We need to talk about this in private," was all he said. And then they moved a little aside, and I didn't hear him. He made a gesture in my direction, and the cop looked at me. The old saying about a criminal always returning to the scene of the crime flashed through my mind as the cop looked me over. At some point, Asshole looked in my direction again and pointed his finger. I smirked and turned away. A half hour or so later, I drove off, stopping only to wipe my phone after wiping everything off. I tossed it out the window onto the grass by the road a few miles away, not far from where I knew the teenagers hung out. While there was a chance it would fall into the hands of the police, I doubted it, and the incriminating material was removed anyway. I dumped it there because there was less chance of it being found than at the gas station, where they might find the surveillance tape of me doing it. I was alarmed, but I didn't call or otherwise talk to Bobby or Evan that night. I had something scheduled with Bobby the next day, and I figured we could talk then. I did tell Marie about the theft, though, to gauge her reaction. "Hey, something weird happened at the show today. One of the cars was stolen." "Oh, which car? And they found it?" asked Marie, not really caring that anything interesting had happened to me that I shared. She was still going around me like I was on pins and needles, dancing around the elephant in the room. It was Jonathan Williams' '69 Barracuda. It was upsetting. Marie turned pale at the mention of Asshole. He was like a savage when the cops got there. And I don't know why, but he kept looking at me. I cranked the screw a little harder. I wonder why," was her only comment. "So, where are you taking me to dinner tonight?" She quickly changed the subject. "I'm feeling kind of primal tonight. I feel like I'm a shark, devouring and destroying all these little annoying things around me." "Well, maybe not a shark, but Red Lobster, and you're eating a huge plate of shrimp, got it." It wasn't until I stepped back to clean myself up that I realized she may have made a pun. I was a barracuda and had just gobbled up Jonathan Williams' prize, and he was a shrimp. At least I hope that's what she meant and not something else. The Red Lobster was delicious, and again, Marie wore me out that night. I think somewhere during all this, Marie was replaced by a star making a feature-length movie a day, just like she did me. The next day, bright and early, the police arrived right at 8 a.m. I was already up, but Marie was still asleep upstairs. I was surprised, of course, but also nervous. In my mind, there was only one reason the police would question me. They had guessed what we had done. You can imagine how nervous I was, but I tried my best not to show it. "Mr. Preston, can we have a few minutes of your time?" One of the police officers, Lawrence judging by his name tag, asked. "We have a few questions about yesterday's theft of a brown Plymouth Barracuda, 1969 Plymouth Barracuda, belonging to one Jonathan Williams at the car show yesterday. We understand you were there and would like to talk to you." I let the two men in and invited them to sit down and offered them a cup of coffee. An employee from the other office, Hinton, judging by his name tag, accepted the coffee, but Lawrence declined. Lawrence started the conversation when I brought the coffee, creamer, and sweetener. We're trying to find every lead we can. You were there and, from what we understand, took pictures of the people at the exhibit. We were hoping to get copies of them and ask you some other questions. Frankly, it seems to Mr. Williams for some reason that you may have been involved. We don't agree that you were involved, but Mr. Williams has given us a motive. That said, we know where you were at the time of the carjacking. At least 30 people have already stated that you were at the 1960s Best Car Awards and were actually driving it. Mr. Williams himself admits you were there, but insists you know something. What motive could I possibly have? I mean, I don't like Jonathan, but I have no reason to hate him. Heck, he dated my wife before I really got to know her. Their breakup because he couldn't keep it in his pants with other girls eventually led to us being together. He can be a bit of a jerk, but really, I should be grateful to him. And are you grateful, Mr. Preston? What do you mean? I can't discuss that right now. That sounds strange. Anyway, the last time I saw Jonathan's car was around 4 or so. Jonathan got to the tent closer to 4:50, maybe 5. And yes, I can give you the pictures I took. I walked over to my computer and connected it to my phone to download the pictures, then copied them to a small, inexpensive flash drive and walked back to the officers who were discreetly looking at everything in the room. It's not pleasant when police officers get curious for no apparent reason. Here are the pictures, Officer Lawrence. I'd love to have the flash drive back when you're done. I'm curious as to why, aside from the pictures, you're here. Did you say Jonathan thinks I did it? At that moment, I heard a slight sigh and looked up to see Marie. I knew I could tell as if the reason Marie sighed was because of the presence of police officers in the room. Honey, it's Officers Lawrence and Hinton. They want the pictures I took yesterday of the crowd and the cars of the various contestants. Oh, Mrs. Preston, may I have a moment? Hinton asked. Certainly. What do you want? Alone? She looked lost and pale as she led him into the kitchen. What are you talking about? I asked Lawrence. Just need to verify something Mr. Williams said. Now tell me, where did you go after Mr. Williams' car was stolen? I laughed. Yeah, I stayed there for a little while and then came home. Marie, my wife, wanted to go out to dinner, so we went to Red Lobster and then came home. Why? You make it sound like I have something to worry about. No, nothing like that. He was trying to allay my fears, but I knew more about what was going on than he did. He and his partner were trying to find out from my so-called loving wife if the motive asshole had given them was real. Anyway, the conversation died down at that point. A few minutes later, Marie and Hinton returned to the room. Hinton nodded to Lawrence and they got up to leave. Thank you for your help, Mr. Preston. If you remember anything that might help you, here's my card, he said, handing me a card with his contact information. And then the two men left. What did they want to talk to you about? I asked Marie. She went a little pale when I asked, but then she said, he just wanted to talk about our old relationship when we were dating, and whether or not you and Jonathan get along. Not too well. He's actually kind of an asshole, I replied. He's not that bad, but he's not you, that's for sure. I love you, Hank. I don't know. He treated people really badly on the show last night. And he was a bad sport. Plus he called his barracuda a babe magnet. That just sounds like an asshole to me. Yeah, I guess it sounds like he's an asshole. But he's not important. After all, he's not my husband, the man I love. He's just some guy, some asshole I dated. I love you, Hank. I realized what she was trying to accomplish. She wanted me to say it to reassure her. I love you too, Marie. It hurt me to say it. I knew it was a lie. I knew it was the truth. And I didn't want to say it, but it wasn't time to stop saying it yet. Bobby called later that day and begged to meet. We talked on the phone, mostly about nothing like fishing. I wanted to ask him how it went, but I didn't dare. Life went on as usual. A few days later, I met Bobby again at DQ. We sat and had a meal, chatting about nothing. We only briefly touched on the subject of the car being stolen, as it was now going around the world, but asked why, with so many other decent cars at the show, someone would steal this particular one. We knew, of course, but it wasn't reflected in our conversation because we wanted to avoid being overheard. We speculated as to why someone would want to steal this car. It had already been revealed that the thieves were wearing jackets that said Classic Cars and the Dodge Coronet logo that also adorned the truck. As it turned out, they were stickers that had come off, but they were enough to fool people. And both of us mentioned in passing that Williams was at fault, and it was insurance fraud. I don't know if the police heard this conversation or not, or even heard about it directly. although we talked about it loud enough that a couple other passersby must have heard. We hoped the rumor would spread. 10 days after the theft, he finally came looking for me. On the one hand, I was surprised he hadn't done it sooner. He wanted my woman, and he thought I had taken his most precious possession. He came to pick me up in the parking lot of my work on Tuesday night, just as 5 other people I worked with were coming out. I'd seen his usual car in the back lot, so his appearance wasn't a complete surprise, but I let it appear that way. The blow to my back was painful as hell. It didn't help that he then crashed headfirst into the roof of my car. "Where's my car, asshole?" After that, he slammed my face into the back rack of my truck. "You couldn't take me entertaining Marie, could you? She should have been mine from the start. You're just a wimp, you piece of shit. Where the hell is my car?" I was a little stunned, but I knew this was going to happen. But my coworkers at work didn't. It took them a moment before they got to me. I blacked out because the next image I saw was paramedics working on me. I turned my head and saw him lying 5 feet away from me, his hands cuffed behind his back. "That bastard stole my car! He stole it! The little limp prick can't take care of his wife and is mad at me for helping her. You have to beat it out of him where he put my car!" he yelled. And I could hear my boss in the background talking to some of my coworkers. They were discussing my marital status and whether I was some kind of car thief. I decided to play up the situation so that I would have plenty of witnesses to him saying this. I tried to say something like, "Marie cheated on me? With you? You bastard! I will destroy you!" I know the blood was bubbling in my mouth when I said that. I'm not sure anyone could have understood me. I felt a prick in my arm as the paramedic inserted an IV. A moment later, I felt my arm go cold, and after a ragged, gurgling breath or two after that, I don't remember anything. I woke up in a familiar place after Marie's betrayal, the emergency room. I didn't wake up long enough to hear the words, "His lung was punctured," and it was very hard to breathe, and it felt like someone was choking me and sitting on my chest at the same time. I felt a strong metallic taste of blood, then nothing again. I woke up for the first time on Saturday, exactly 2 weeks after the theft. I didn't know it was Saturday, of course. My last coherent thoughts were on Tuesday, when asshole attacked me. I was surprised at the way he brought me down with a stealth punch. I was expecting something, but maybe not this. I thought he hit me with the proverbial lead pipe. As it turned out, that wasn't quite the case. He hit me with the jack handle from his car. I was unlucky in that one of the broken ribs punctured my left lung. From what I know now, I barely survived a 7-hour surgery to repair the damaged lung. Even despite my best efforts, it is unlikely that it will ever function as well as it did before, and I will have reduced lung capacity and blood oxygen consumption for the rest of my life. So I will never be able to run the Boston Marathon. Fortunately, I didn't make it my goal to run marathons. When I opened my eyes, I saw that I was in an isolated room, white, brightly lit. A chalkboard on the wall next to the nightstand under the TV said, "Dr. Wisnowski" and RN Maggie next to one of those, "How do you feel?" pain charts. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't hot. I wasn't cold. I couldn't feel my fingers, my hands, my arms, my legs, my toes. The only thing I felt was a pain in my throat because of the tube in it. I forced my hand to move and heard a loud, shrill alarm. A moment later, a beautiful young woman rushed into the room. I suddenly remembered all those stories about nurses. "Mr. Preston, please don't move. You must be calm. You are in a hospital. You have been attacked and require emergency surgery. Your wife and some members of your family have been here most of the time, and I will let them in after the doctor comes in. Blink your eyes twice if you understand." I blinked twice, and she said she would have to leave the tube in my throat for a while longer. I guess I was off again for a bit because I didn't see him come in, but his voice brought me back. "Mr. Preston, hello, I'm Dr. Wisnowski. I'm the doctor in charge of your care, and I'd like to talk to you. I need you to focus and not try to move or speak, but you can blink your eyes. Once for no, twice for yes, okay?" I blinked twice. "You were attacked last Tuesday. Your attacker used a metal bar and broke 2 of your ribs. One of them punctured a lung. Moments later, he broke another rib as well as your right arm. I want you to wiggle the fingers, just the fingers, of your left hand." And I did. "Good. Now move the fingers, and only the fingers, of your right hand." "Good." He pulled back the sheet covering my feet. "I need you to wiggle your fingers, but gently, on your left foot, then on your right foot." "Good. We were worried that there might be damage to your spine, but that doesn't seem to be the case. You're very lucky. You should be discharged from here in 4 days or so, and healing will happen in a month or so." I didn't feel lucky. After looking at the numbers on the chart And then at the numbers on the beeping machines, he told the nurse that he wanted to increase the oxygen supply through the nasal tube, or whatever that thing is called that you hang from your ears and hang under your nose. He also told her that she could remove the intubation tube or something, I think that's what he called it, and that I was only allowed fluids, which had to be monitored closely, only ice for the first 2 hours, then broth and jello. Oh my goodness, what a feast. Broth and jello. After she removed the tube, which I did feel, and it was uncomfortable to say the least, she placed a small cup of ice chips on a tray in front of me. But she didn't give me any, and I quickly realized that I couldn't move my left arm, since it was attached to the bed rail, and my right arm, since it was in an inflatable cast and bandage. As the dryness and sore throat began to hit my brain hard, I decided that Maggie was an inveterate sadist. Luckily for me, a few minutes later, Marie walked in. She looked like she was about to pounce on me in bed, but then a hand grabbed her and pulled her back. She looked like hell, no makeup, painted on, unkept, in need of a shower, and in complete misery. I don't know from what depths of hell I managed to wring it out, taking some of my soul and vitality with each word. You. And it was probably the most drawn-out you I'd ever uttered. Cheated. And her eyes began to water before I could continue. Next. Each word required effort. Me. She looked devastated that I'd said it. With. And I blacked out again. My next conscious memory was of crying, and then the tenor of Bobby's voice. I could hear soft words being spoken in the background, but at first I couldn't make anything out. Then I began to understand. Bobby's soft words sounded like, "We have to leave before he wakes up again." More tears came. But I love him. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. I couldn't tell who was speaking, as the voice wasn't familiar enough. It was too broken by the sobs to make out anything more than words, and barely at that. You can talk to him later, Marie, but you need to go, rest, get cleaned up and ready. He remembers what William said. He knows, Marie, and your being here right now might do more harm than help. I'll call you if he asks for you. I let myself sink back into darkness when I heard another voice say something else. When I woke up again, I muttered, "Ice." I'm not sure if anyone understood me, but a moment later I felt a small spoonful of surprisingly cold ice at my lips. I sucked on the ice and let it moisten and soothe my sore mouth and throat. A second one followed a moment later, and I opened my eyes to see my brother's concerned face. "Welcome back to the living. You gave us quite a scare, little brother." Mike tried to smile weakly. Bobby leaned toward him. "The keys have been planted. Things are about to go to shit, Hank. The asshole who did this to you is going to pay and pay and pay. And when it's over, I'll be sending his cellmate packs of cigarettes every month saying, 'Make him your bitch,' as soon as he's in jail. Right now, they're just keeping him in jail, but it looks like he'll get 5 to 7 years just for the assault. Insurance fraud will be gravy." 2. Graves. "Bobby?" muttered I slowly. Bobby realized what I was asking. The old saying about revenge and having to dig 2 graves. "This and your spat with Marie will be the only graves for you, Hank. But I intend to make sure he goes through hell for what he did to you in the parking lot." I managed to get more ice chips, a small sip of water, and even a small sip of broth that had already cooled. Bobby, of course, had eaten the jello. When I was able to speak well enough, we finally started talking about something important. "How's she holding up, Bobby?" "She's devastated, of course. I mean, after all, it's all her fault, right? For all her faults, I think she really loves you." "So, have you put the key back? Have you put the coin down yet?" I asked. "The key is in the coin slot of his car. He left it unlocked when he attacked you, and it hadn't been towed for 2 days. The car was locked for some reason when the police towed it away. I wonder when that happened, eh? Dima's getting a ride. Sometime tomorrow morning. The attack was in the papers, and it was gaining momentum. The news about him yelling about the stolen car came out this morning, so it'll hit the paper tomorrow. Which means Tom will flip a coin after the paper comes out." "Tom? Who's Tom?" I asked, perplexed. "Tom Warner, Darla's husband. Hell, you were photographed presenting him with an award at the car show. An Impala? Did he win Best in Show or something? Thomas Warner is Darla's husband? What the hell? No, I don't want to know. The less I know, the better. He won fair and square, Hank. And it's just a fluke that he was able to prove you were there. And he's the one who's going to nail that asshole to the cross when they find the CUDA. I'll have to turn the divorce back on, Bobby. Now that it's been made public, we can move on." "Hank, aren't you getting revenge on Marie?" I could tell from his voice that Bobby thought divorce was revenge enough. "No, I think I've softened." I still love that stupid bitch. And yes, she probably loves me. I barely heard Bobby whisper loves before I continued. But marriage is about trust and loyalty. She hurt me and violated that trust. She hasn't been faithful. I can't stay married to her. I wept a little. It was pain, I swear. Okay, brother. I'll bring your shark here on Monday. You ordered a female shark, right? Yeah. At that point, the conversation pretty much dried up. And after a little more time, Bobby left me in the not-so-gentle care of the Marquise de Sade, Maggie's nurse. She was a vicious harpy who tormented me for no reason at all. Tales of naughty nurses are not true, at least around Maggie. Later the next day, the cops visited me again at the hospital. It was the same couple, but this time there was something different in their gazes. A brooding that wasn't there last time. Mr. Preston, I want to apologize to you. The last time we spoke, you were a far-fetched carjacking suspect, began Officer Lawrence. I just nodded for him to continue. Earlier today, the 1969 Plymouth Barracuda car in question was recovered after a tip caused by a newspaper article about your assault. The owner of the storage unit realized the car was in storage, and we found a tape showing that it had been stolen by the owner, probably for insurance purposes. This asshole stole his own car? Then why did he attack me about it? I questioned. Unless I sounded completely fake, I knew the pain, and the fact that I was hurt would be to blame. Then, Mr. Williams was having a relationship with your wife. We believe he was trying to get you arrested for theft so he could have a cleaner field to deepen the relationship. His attack on you was partly motivated by jealousy and partly by a desire to draw more attention to you. Unfortunately for him, we found the key to the vault in his car, and there's video footage of him putting the car in the vault. So it's true then. Marie was cheating on me with him. Did she know he was going to attack me? Ah, yes, she was having an affair with him. But we don't believe she knew of his intention to attack you. The attack was actually thwarted because news of it caused the owner of the warehouse, one Thomas Warner, the one who vouched for your whereabouts at the time of the theft, to actually inform the police of the car's whereabouts when he discovered it had been reported stolen. So, insurance fraud and setting me up? Is that what he was trying to do, other than physically hurt me? That's what we think is the case. The district attorney has charged him with assault with a deadly weapon, simple assault, insurance fraud, lying to the police, and all the other charges they think they can bring. I'm not sure this is going to go over well, he grinned, especially since most criminals lie to the police, but he's got a case. He's looking at a minimum of 8 years, and they're trying for more every day. Since he's a clear danger to you and can escape, they were able to deny him bail on the assault charge. The additional charges will make it easier. We talked for a few more minutes and then they left. A few hours later, Marie showed up. She looked scared and like she had been crying. I saw her and just got angry. I could vent the anger and resentment I felt now. I could express my pain. But I saw pain in her eyes too, which surprised me at first. How could she feel hurt because of my pain, my resentment, my anger? Eventually, I realized that she felt pain because she knew she had caused it. Her actions hurt me, destroyed us. Hank and Marie, the golden couple, at least in our eyes, who would always be together, always love, and who had been in sync for so long. Bobby asked me to give you some time before I came to talk to you. I'm sorry, Hank. I don't know why I did it. It's not about you. It was never your fault. And I never would have believed he could hurt you like that or try to put you in jail. I'm so sorry. What do you say to that? The pain he caused me doesn't compare to the pain you caused me, Marie. I wasn't enough. I gave you my heart, my soul, and it wasn't enough. I gave you my love, my faith, my trust, my loyalty, and it wasn't enough. You killed me, Marie. You took one of the two things I unwaveringly believed in, and you destroyed it. The only thing you could have done to hurt me more is if it was Bobby. I need you to leave, Marie. I love you too much to look at you knowing what you've done to me. I love you too, Hank. I know you don't believe it, but it's true. I love you with all my heart and all my soul. I'll do anything you ask. I created this hell I've driven you and me into, and I'll accept that only you can get us out of it. She walked away with an expression of devastation on her face. And I still love you, Marie, whispered I, as she walked away, tears streaming down my face again. As Scarlett O'Hara said in Gone with the Wind, tomorrow will be another day. The next day was indeed a different day. My new attorneys arrived. That's right, lawyers, plural. A female shark, Tamara Hughes, and another man she introduced as a civil litigation attorney, Mike Bass, with whom she had worked. She was leading the discussion and immediately wanted to badmouth Marie. I had originally wanted to do that myself, but Marie's brief appearance the day before had dampened that desire a bit, and combined with my earlier conversation with Bobby, warranted a softer approach. I decided that I wanted to just split the property instead. Only she would get the house, and I would get most of our savings. I didn't want the house, not after he had vandalized it, but I couldn't find it in me to hurt her in retaliation. I had loved her too much and for too long to hurt her more than I needed to. I guess my anger and resentment was drying up. The anger, the hate. It takes energy to keep the heat and fire going, and I just couldn't keep it up enough. My shark was a little disappointed that I wanted to be fair to her. I got the impression that some woman had hurt someone she cared a lot about and wanted others of her sex to suffer when they hurt an innocent person. But I also think she understood. And then the smile got wider when the conversation finally turned to Jonathan Williams. Bass spoke out on the matter. We should sue him for the injuries he caused. In fact, we should probably hurry up so we can freeze assets before trial, and then he'll have less money to defend himself. With a conservative approach, I think we can get $300, $500,000 from him for your pain and suffering, his interference in your marriage, his attempt to frame you for stealing his car, and the slander and humiliation you suffered at your workplace. If we get the right judge, the amount could be higher. And the car, too. I want his car. He took away the most precious thing I have, my wife, so I want his car. Just then, I heard Miss Hughes start to laugh. Oh yes, I like that idea. If I can't find my wife, at least I can help you crucify him. Marie was told that she had to meet with Miss Hughes in a few days, that there were papers to be signed. Bobby went in my place and later told me that she cried for 10 minutes before picking up the pen. When she tried to sign, her tears soaked into the papers that they had to be retyped so she could sign them. This was not pleasant to hear. But Marie didn't protest, didn't object, didn't ask for anything. She trusted me enough to sign the papers. 90 days after signing, we were single again. It was depressing. 19 days after the attack, the hospital finally sent me to a rehab center where I was to spend the next few weeks. The day I arrived there, I was brought a flower arrangement with one blue hyacinth and one daffodil. There was no card, nor was there one, as identical arrangements arrived every 3 days after that. I don't know what the symbol was, and I can't guarantee I know who sent them, though I suspect it was Marie. After I was discharged, I went to live at Bobby and Sue's house until I was fully capable and had my own place. Bobby, Evan, and a few other friends of mine removed my belongings from the house and moved them either to Bobby's or to a storage unit. The court process went quickly. I was surprised since I had only been in foster care for 2 weeks by the time of the court hearing. When Sue told me that Bass had left papers about what to wear, when to come, etc., I got nervous. I had not told either Miss Hughes or Mr. Bass that I had actually participated, at least as a conspirator, in the theft of the car. I also knew that I really didn't want to lie under oath, so I was very careful about what I signed on the papers. I really didn't want to switch places with Zasrans depending on which side of the court I sat on. I did not have much to fear, however. I was never called to testify. Others did, as I was considered too traumatized by the traumatic events to be reliable. I expected Williams's attorney to subpoena me, but he didn't. This meant that I didn't have to perjure myself or say, I don't remember. Of course, it didn't make much difference. The district attorney denied Williams bail because he was a danger to me. In a normal situation, this would mean that the attorney would prepare a lawsuit for the defendant. But in this case, that didn't happen. So Williams was forced to sit in orange jail clothes during the trial. I found out later that the reason for the poor choice of attorney was that he was the cheapest one Williams could find. He assumed that the case would be overturned, or at least be cheap, and he could spend his money on a good lawyer. Big mistake. The whole trial took 2 days, much longer than I had anticipated, because Bass insisted on admitting a lot of additional testimony and evidence into the case. I didn't understand why he was wasting the court's time by bringing in so many of my fellow attackers as witnesses, and why so many people from the auto show tent were brought in too, at least later. It was a nasty trick my lawyers played on Williams. They put much of the defamatory testimony and evidence into the official record where it could be used by the district attorney to aid in the prosecution. The court also reached a quick verdict, resulting in a landslide win, more than I asked for. It didn't hurt that Williams was caught trying to hide assets. After the lawyers got their cut, I got $483,000 after taxes, and a brown 1969 Plymouth Barracuda. The car brought me more joy than money, although the money was good and enough to buy a couple of equally good cars, including a '63 Mach 1 and Vet with split rear windows. I got almost as much pleasure 8 months later when the verdict in the criminal case was announced. Asshole got 11 years, much more than the 7 Bobby had initially told me about. I decided to go to the last divorce court hearing. By then, I was walking, though still using a cane, and could drive. I got behind the wheel of the Barracuda that day, simply because I wanted to get myself out of the depression I was in over the dissolution of my marriage. I never thought it was possible that Marie and I wouldn't be together forever, even before the butter pecan incident. But here I am. I entered the courtroom with Miss Hughes. She was attractive, I suppose, average height, small busted, but with a butt like Jennifer Lopez. Nice face, medium-length hair, pulled up in what is called a loose bundle. Yes, I got a little glimpse of her. I'm a man. It's what we do. But she was not what my heart desired. I looked around the courtroom and saw Marie. She looked, as she always did, beautiful. Perhaps she wasn't a Hollywood beauty. She may not have been Marilyn Monroe, but she could have been Mary Ann from Gilligan's Island. I wasn't looking at my Marie. That woman no longer existed. In front of me was another woman who didn't have that fire in her that I loved. I was looking at a woman in mourning. And the judge brought the court to order and began our case. Tamara said a few words that I could barely hear. Marie's attorney said a few words that I almost didn't hear either, and then said that Marie had something to say to me and the court. I was surprised by this. She stood up and looked at the judge. She smiled a weak smile and then turned and looked at me. Turning back to the judge, she began. Your Honor, I was the luckiest woman in the world. I had a man who loved me and who I loved. I had dreams that we would soon start our family. I dreamed of our children and the love we would have. And then I shattered those dreams. I made a mistake, and in a moment of weakness, I betrayed my husband to remind myself of the what-ifs from my past. Sometimes the past has to stay in the past. It was my fault, not my husband's. I had a brief affair with an ex-boyfriend, and things changed between my husband and I almost instantly. Even now, I don't know why he realized something was wrong, but he did. In the end, it didn't matter. I set things straight on my own, and that is my greatest shame and my greatest regret. Then she looked at me, turning away from the judge. Hank, I want you to know that I will never forgive myself for betraying you. I was weak, I was stupid, and I was wrong. I can't undo that, and I know you can never fully forgive me for what I did. I don't want you to set me free, but I understand that you need to be free in order to heal and be whole again. I will give you everything you ask for, willingly, as I once gave all of myself to you alone. I know that if that were true, you would still be mine, and I would still be yours. But I blew it. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me and love me enough to let me back into your life. Know that if you do, I will always love you and I will never hurt you again. And know that if you don't, I will still always love you. Turning to the judge, she added, Your Honor, my husband has been more than fair, more than even-handed in his treatment of me. The man I betrayed him with is now in prison. He is being tried for a brutal assault on my husband, committed in order to free me to be with him. He tried to frame my husband for the crime. I will not allow Hank to be hurt in this way, and I will not allow him to cause me more pain. I am asking you to sign the divorce petition and give him a divorce on whatever terms he offers. Please, just don't let me cause him any more pain. I could see the tears streaming down her cheeks. I know that my own eyes were bugging me as well. The judge thought about her request for a moment and then turned to me. So, Mr. Preston, are you sure you want a divorce? I can schedule a counseling session. Your Honor, I love Marie. I will always love Marie. I just can't be her husband anymore. I need to be a man, Your Honor. Marie knew my past, my history. She'd had similar incidents herself, in fact, with the very man she'd cheated with, fornicated with me, where she was the victim of betrayal. I think this is the what if she was talking about. I love her, Your Honor, but I can't be her husband. The pain is too great for that. The judge nodded sadly, then raised his gavel. He looked at Marie for a moment, then at me, then at his gavel. Quickly lowering it, he said, The petition for divorce in the case of Preston v. Preston is granted. Words I thought I would never hear, words that took a piece of my soul with them, words that heralded the official end of my marriage to the woman who was most likely still the love of my life. We walked out of the courtroom, me with my lawyer, Marie with hers. Tamara held me back for a moment to discuss the upcoming criminal trial against Williams, mostly giving me advice on how to behave. She knew that part of her service in this case as a defense attorney for men included getting revenge on that asshole. As we were nearing the end of our conversation, I felt a light touch on my shoulder and a familiar scent hit my nose. I half turned to her. I hope this helps you find the happiness I stole from you, my love. And then she was gone, and even in the crowded room, I was alone. Life went on. By this point, I had started working again. Bobby and I went fishing, adding Evan to our regular outings, and occasionally seeing Tom, who was becoming an ever better friend as time went on. I found a house, bigger than the old one but empty, and moved out of Bobby and Sue's spare room. One way or another, I needed it. Somewhere along the line, I found out I was going to be an uncle, and they needed the space. It was a bittersweet moment for all three of us, sort of like dark chocolate when the news is both incredibly joyous but still leaves a bitter aftertaste. The new place had a large two-car garage, so the Barracuda was once again queen of the garage, though it was used occasionally, and at least once a week we went to DQ. I was sitting at one of the picnic tables, looking at the stone cow, one of DQ's unique features, and contemplating my life when I felt a strong hand on my shoulder, pressing down on me. Stop looking so glum, Hank. Hell, you have one of your Oreo Blizzard. At least you can smile while you eat it. Bobby began. Hey bro, looks like Sue couldn't move fast enough to stop you from going to DQ tonight, huh? I replied, turning to my right to see him. How the hell did you just describe me, Mr. Preston? I heard from behind me on my left as Sue came into view. Open mouth, insert foot, chew down to your ankle. You're just shining today, Sue. Better, but I'm watching you. I noticed the glint in her eyes and the soft but still restrained nudge of my future nephew. Watching. Always watching, I repeated in my best Roz voice from Monsters, Inc. Hey, honey, get your brother a peanut butter milkshake on me, will you? She quickly replied to Bobby. We all laughed. After a minute or two of laughter, Sue became more serious. Bobby finally told me how you know. Also told me everything else. I should spank you both for putting yourself at such risk. But I love you both too much to do that. Don't ever do it again. And if I'm ever tempted, she mumbled, not likely, and then started again. I'll remember you and Marie and I promise it will never happen to me and Bobby. And of course then she started giggling and then humming the old Janis Joplin song, Bobby McGee. After all, freedom is just another word for nothing to lose. But feeling good is good enough for me. Good enough for me and my Bobby P. And with those words, she smiled, took a spoonful of caramel and wet walnuts from Bobby, and took a big bite. Just don't treat me badly, and you'll never have to worry about being free, baby, Bobby told her, looking only at his bride. Get a room, guys. Oh, wait, that's how it happened. I nodded toward the baby bump. Sue giggled and simply said, uh-huh. As we finished our treats, Bobby finally brought it up. Hank, you need to take a real stress relief vacation. You've been moping around for months now, and we all want Hank back. It's time, Hank. Find some hot stuff, get on the I-65 freeway and head south. When you get to Mobile, turn right on New Orleans or left on Tampa. Either way, drive. You've got the money, and your boss isn't going to fire you. He knows as well as we do that you need to get away for a month or so. What about the baby? Well, we have these things called cell phones, and we also have calendars. I said a month or two, not 4. You could take 2 months and come back in time to help me finish painting the room. I'll think about it. And after I left that night, I did. I thought about it a lot. The Barracuda had never been farther than Indianapolis from Shelbyville. It had less than 4,000 miles, but it was still a car that deserved to be driven. And Bobby was right. I needed to get laid, needed to get cleaned up. So I made arrangements at work and met Bobby at DQ. That's where I was going to tell him I was leaving. I didn't know where the road would take me, but I was going to leave. I packed light, taking only a small overnight bag. That would be enough, because I was going to let the wind carry me wherever it wanted to go. Imagine my surprise when, as Bobby and I sat at the table, Sue and Marie drove up. They were friends, and had been since I started dating Marie. I should have known that one of the few people who would be there for Marie would be Sue. Marie was with me when I introduced Bobby and Sue on their first date, 5 months later. She looked good, and my heart fluttered a little. It must have been peanut dust or something. She was wearing a short dress, a little short for early fall weather, pale green with a white belt around her waist and a pair of old sneakers. She looked nice and casual, but even then I could see the hunted look in her eyes. So I hear you're going to be traveling, seeing the sights of the South for a couple months, she said. No greeting, just a manly attempt. I looked at Bobby, who threw a, "You've got some work to do," look at Sue, and then looked at Sue, who was trying her best to do the, Oh, my back, my legs, they hurt so much because I'm pregnant, look, and turned back to Bobby. Yeah, I guess so. It's just, I need to get cleaned up. Find what's important, you know? I'm not going away forever, just for a month or so. Gonna take the CUDA. I pointed to it standing in the parking lot, drawing the attention of the other visitors. And open it up a bit. By the way, I'm calling it butter pecan now. Butter pecan? Why, you know what, never mind. Butter pecan, right? Good, Marie remarked. Bobby and Sue's silence turned into a roar. I hope you find what you're looking for, Hank. I hope you find it, and your heart will be whole again. Thank you for that, Marie. Sip. I just wish I could be the one you find it with again. I know it won't happen, but I wish it were true. Hmm. I didn't know what to say back. I finished my ice cream, hugged Bobby and Sue, and then slowly walked to the car. Marie followed me at arm's length from the table with a look of regret on her face. I got into the car and started it, hearing the throaty roar of the big V8. I got out of the car and walked over to lower the top so the wind would flutter my hair and allow me to truly enjoy what the car was giving me. When I got back in the car, I looked up and saw Marie still standing there looking at me, with tears on her cheeks, but still trying to show herself brave and strong. I dropped my gaze to the table where Bobby was looking at me, stroking Sue's bulging belly, and then turned back to Marie. I looked at her and realized that even though we were divorced, even though she wasn't the most beautiful woman in the world, and even though she cheated on me, I loved her. She was a slut. She was my blushing bride. She was a sinner. She was a saint. She was a whore. She was my whore. She was my pain. She was my joy. They say that in the end you have to ask yourself if you're better off with or without her. I knew I could live without her. I knew it. Bobby had given me that knowledge back on that fishing trip months ago. But it wasn't about whether I could live without her. It was about the fact that I didn't want to live without her. We might never get married again, but I knew I still wanted her. I reached up, opened the passenger door of the car, and looked at her. The expression on her face, so mournful and sad, had changed just like that. I saw regret replaced with hope, regret replaced with joy, and pain replaced with love. And I saw lust. Lots of lust. And so, 10 minutes later, I was behind the wheel of the Barracuda that would forever be known as the Butter Pecan on the I-65 freeway, and Marie handed me a Hummer. I felt the first raindrops splash on my chest just as the scent of Marie's hair reached my nose. Somehow, the dream I dreamed of months ago was almost coming true. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.